The wind was ablaze against her iron armor, each gust carrying a flurry of snow so thick it felt like the world was being erased. Ilara, a wanderer by trade and by heart, had been trekking through the taiga for 3 days, and the sun had become a distant memory. Just as the last of her cooked mutton ran out and the cold began to seep past her enchantments, she saw it. A faint, golden glow through the blizzard's curtain. A village. It was nestled in a valley, sheltered by colossal spruce trees that wore their snowy coats like ancient kings. Lanterns hung from oak fences, their light soft and welcoming. The place was called Snowdrift Hollow, a name she learned from a weathered sign half buried in a snowbank. It was prosperous, with well-tended wheat fields peeking from under the white blanket, and a sturdy-looking iron golem patrolling the perimeter, its steps heavy and silent in the deep snow. As Ilara entered the village square, she felt the familiar rhythm of villager life. A leather worker hurried from his workshop to his home, a cartographer adjusted the monocle on his generous nose, and 2 children chased a chicken around the central well. But there was a strangeness to it all. The usual cacophony of murmurs, trades, and greetings was absent. The villagers moved with purpose, nodding to each other, but never speaking. The only sounds were the crunch of snow, the crackle of fires, and the howling wind. And then she saw him. He stood near the well, separate from the others, perfectly still. He was a librarian, judging by his white robes, but there was no lectern nearby. He wasn't reading, or trading, or even looking at anything in particular. He just stood, motionless as a statue carved from ice and wool. His arms were folded neatly inside his sleeves, and his large square head was held at a fixed angle. His eyes, emerald green and unblinking, seemed to drink in the world without ever giving anything back. Curiosity piqued, Ilara approached him. She held out an emerald, the universal sign of trade. The librarian didn't move. His gaze didn't flicker. It was as if she wasn't there at all. She tried again, holding up a book and quill. Nothing. The other villagers passed by, their paths arcing around the silent figure as if he were a natural, unmovable part of the landscape, like a tree or a boulder. As dusk bled its purple hues across the sky, a bell rang out, its tone oddly muffled. Immediately, every villager retreated indoors. Doors of dark oak clicked shut, one by one, until the square was empty. Every villager, that is, except one. The silent librarian remained by the well, a solitary figure against the deepening twilight. The iron golem continued its patrol, occasionally glancing toward the librarian, a silent exchange passing between them. Ilara found a small, abandoned hut to take shelter in. Through its single window she watched. She saw the moon climb the sky, a perfect circle of polished quartz. She saw zombies and skeletons begin to shamble out from the dark woods, their groans and rattling bones swallowed by the wind. They tested the village's edge, but the golem was efficient, dispatching them with powerful, sweeping arms. And through it all, the librarian stood watch. He did not sleep. He did not flinch. He just watched. The next day was the same. The villagers emerged, tended their farms, and worked their stations in near silence. The librarian stood by the well. Ilara spent the day replenishing her supplies, chopping wood and mining for iron in a nearby cave. But her mind was on the silent villager. Was he cursed? A ghost? Some strange new form of golem? The villagers seemed to protect him in their own way, when a baby zombie, small and terrifyingly fast, slipped past the golem during the day. A farmer intercepted it with his hoe before it could get anywhere near the unmoving librarian. They didn't speak to him, but they clearly valued his presence. That night, Ilara decided she wouldn't sleep either. She climbed to the roof of her hut, a vantage point that gave her a clear view of the square and the dark forest beyond. The cold was a physical presence, but her determination was a fire within. For hours, nothing happened. The golem patrolled. The librarian stood. Then, just after the moon reached its zenith, something changed. The librarian's head turned, a slow, deliberate movement of a fraction of an inch. His unblinking gaze was now fixed on a specific point in the deep woods. Alara followed his line of sight, her eyes straining against the darkness. At first, she saw nothing. Then, a flicker of movement, and another. It wasn't the clumsy shamble of a zombie, or the jerky dance of a skeleton. This was different, organized. A wave of green, pixelated flesh surged from between the trees. Dozens of zombies, more than she had ever seen in one place, moved with a shared, hungry purpose. Behind them, skeletons knocked arrows, their bows drawn in eerie unison, and among them, a low, guttural hissing grew louder and louder. Creepers, a legion of them, waddling forward like living bombs. This was not a random nightly spawn. This was an assault. The village's muffled bell rang frantically. The iron golem charged forward, a hero of rust and poppies, but it was immediately swarmed. It threw zombies aside, its iron fists crushing bone and rotten flesh, but for everyone it dispatched, 3 more took its place. The wooden doors of the houses began to splinter under the relentless pounding of the horde. Panic seized Alara. She drew her diamond sword, its sharpness a cold comfort, but she knew she was just one person. The village was about to be overrun. It was then that she saw the silent villager finally move. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He walked. His steps were measured and calm as he approached the village bell at the center of the square. The chaos swirled around him, zombies clawing at his robes, skeletons firing arrows that seemed to curve just enough to miss him. But he was an island of tranquility in a sea of undeath. He reached the bell, but he did not ring it. Instead, he placed both of his large, blocky hands flat against its bronze surface. He closed his eyes. A sound emanated from the bell, but it wasn't a sound Alara heard with her ears. It was a pressure, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the snow, through the wood of the houses, through the very air itself. It was the sound of absolute, profound silence given form. The effect on the horde was immediate and catastrophic. The zombies stopped clawing at the doors, their heads lolling on their necks as if confused. The skeletons lowered their bows, rattling in place, their empty sockets devoid of their former malice. The creepers froze, their fuses sputtering out with a faint fizzle. The entire army of the night was paralyzed, caught in a web of silent, powerful energy. The iron golem, unaffected, seized its chance. With the horde stunned and disoriented, it moved through them like a scythe through wheat. It methodically, relentlessly, tore the undead apart until nothing remained but a scattering of rotten flesh, bones and gunpowder and the pristine snow. As the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold, the hum faded. The librarian removed his hands from the bell, opened his eyes, and walked calmly back to his spot by the well. He resumed his motionless vigil as if nothing had happened. The villagers emerged from their homes. They didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer. They simply began to repair the damage. The farmer patched his door. The blacksmith reinforced the fences. But as they worked, many of them would pause and look toward the librarian. Their expressions were not of fear, but of a deep, weary gratitude. One by one, they approached the well, leaving small offerings at its base. A loaf of bread, a freshly mined emerald, a single poppy. The librarian Finch, as Alara later learned his unspoken name was, did not acknowledge the gifts. He didn't need to. Alara finally understood. He wasn't cursed, and he wasn't a prisoner. He was a guardian, a sentinel. His silence was not an absence of speech, but a weapon. His sleepless watch was not an affliction, but a duty. He was the anchor of Snowdrift Hollow, the silent bell that held the darkness at bay. She stayed only long enough to help mend the fences. Before she left, she walked to the well and placed a single, flawless diamond at its base, a token of strength and endurance. The librarian did not turn. He did not blink. He just stood, his emerald eyes fixed on the horizon, watching, always watching, Ace. As Elara walked away, the snow crunching under her boots, she glanced back one last time at the quiet village and his silent protector. She knew she would never forget him, for in the quietest corners of the world, she now understood the greatest guardians are often the ones who never say a word.